Today, we're stepping right into the shadows to trace a truly remarkable paper trail. And I want to be clear right up front, this isn't some wild conspiracy theory. We're talking about a factual, documented history of surveillance, deep secrecy, and the extraordinary lengths a government agency will go to protect its operations. We're going to look at a very specific era, when the Central Intelligence Agency actually turned its highly trained eyes inward, keeping tabs on everyday American citizens. The documents we're unpacking today, they were buried for years, literally totally unknown to the public and even hidden from official government investigations. So, lower the blinds, get comfortable, and let's unravel this hidden history together.
Part 1. The Hilton Hotel Meeting. Okay, let's dive into this. To really grasp the gravity of this story, I need you to picture a very specific, incredibly secretive moment. The date is June 8th, 1965. We're inside a room at the downtown Washington Hilton. A meeting is taking place that will drag on for nearly 4 hours between a CIA security officer and a highly placed informant. And the explicit target of their clandestine conversation? The civil rights leader, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Internal memos from this exact time reveal the CIA was actively cataloging information fueled by these alleged communist infiltration theories to just completely discredit him. You know, when we think of spy agencies, we usually imagine grand cinematic espionage, right? But the reality is often intensely mundane and, honestly, incredibly invasive. The CIA's file on Dr. King wasn't just made up of broad ideological assessments. No, they were tracking the absolute smallest, most intimate footprints of his daily life. I'm talking about photocopies of his haberdashery bills, his Diners Club credit card receipts from trips to Miami and Chicago. They were even logging his handwritten phone messages, stuff from flying services, TV stations, airlines, the Urban League, and meticulously collecting numbers scrawled on the backs of business cards. This was microscopic, relentless tracking. And it gets much, much darker. An internal CIA memo from May of 1965 documents this truly chilling suggestion from someone they only identified as Informant A. This informant believed Dr. King had to be removed as a leader, but they heavily stressed that his removal had to come from within the movement, not from without. Why? Well, Informant A was absolutely terrified that if white sources exposed him, or if he were assassinated, it would, and I quote, only make him a martyr. They basically wanted a clean coup, completely on their own terms. Now, despite these incredibly dark internal discussions, it is absolutely crucial to state where the official findings landed. In 1979, the House Assassinations Committee concluded that while conspiracies were likely in Dr. King's death, they formally cleared both the CIA and the FBI of any actual role in his assassination. So we're not pointing fingers here. We are simply letting the raw, declassified reality of these surveillance operations speak for themselves. Part 2. The vault opens, FOIA. So it begs the question, right? How do we even know about those Diners Club receipts in that hushed Hilton Hotel meeting today? Because for years, absolutely none of this was public. It was completely hidden, even from massive congressional investigations. Well, the vault was finally pried open, entirely against the agency's will, by a very specific legal tool, the Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA. And please, don't think of FOIA as just some boring administrative statute. Think of it as a legal master key. The deeply buried details of the spying on Dr. King came to light strictly because of a FOIA lawsuit brought by author Harold Weisberg. If it wasn't for this law, those pages would literally still be sitting in the dark. Part 3. Spying on the campus. But Dr. King was far from the only target. FOIA lawsuits soon pulled back the curtain on an entirely different theater of domestic surveillance. This one targeted the American anti-war movement on college campuses, an operation ominously styled Project Resistance. Now, back in 1975, the agency boldly told the Rockefeller Commission that this project relied merely on press clippings. They explicitly claimed they used no infiltrators, penetrators, or monitors. And the commission? Well, they were satisfied with that. But FOIA forced out the actual reality. Declassified records proved the CIA used confidential informants repeatedly in places like Texas, California, and D.C. They even unearthed blank confidential informant identification forms created specifically for this project. They caught them red-handed. To really understand the massive scale of this surveillance, let's just look at this number, 50,000. Originally, the Senate's Church Committee thought the CIA had built a nationwide index of maybe, 12 to 16,000 names. But the records later made public under FOIA revealed that the CIA's Office of Security had indexed 50,000 members of the California Peace and Freedom Party alone. And these were primarily just college students. Just try to wrap your head around that sheer volume of domestic data collection.
Part 4. The MKUltra discrepancy.
And this brilliantly illustrates the real power of FOIA, because as the lawsuits kept hitting the agency, they unearthed something even more infamous, the CIA's premier mind control program, MKUltra. When Congress investigated this back in the 1970s, the CIA swore under oath that the records for MKUltra had been completely destroyed in 1973. Case closed, right? Well, wrong. Through FOIA, a former State Department employee named John Marks managed to unearth 16,000 pages of records dealing with exotic drug experiments. The exact files they said didn't exist absolutely did. The scope of what those 16,000 pages revealed was staggering. We're going to move quickly through this because the sheer scale is immense. By 1977, CIA Director Stansfield Turner actually had to testify about these newly discovered documents, and they showed 149 separate projects. They involved 80 different American and Canadian institutions. We're talking universities, hospitals, research foundations, even prisons. The files detailed covert behavior modification and the secret administration of mind-altering drugs. And while the CIA had assured Congress the program phased out in the mid-60s, John Marks actually found evidence that these behavior control projects continued well into the 1970s under the Office of Research and Development.
But, finding out a program exists is very different from actually getting your hands on the files. In 1978, the CIA casually told Marks they had suddenly found an additional 130 boxes of mind control material. But then they released almost nothing of substance to him, just a few trivial documents. Marks's frustration is totally palpable in this quote. He said, "They've been diddling me ever since. In effect, they've already repealed the FOIA, at least as far as mind control is concerned." The agency was clearly figuring out how to stop this bleeding of information.
Part 5. Fighting to re-hide.
I mean, you can only force a secret agency to hand over its most deeply hidden files for so long before they inevitably fight back. By early 1980, the CIA went on the offensive. They started seeking sweeping legislative changes to just close the FOIA vault for good. Of course, they tried to frame this pushback very modestly. CIA Deputy Director Frank Carlucci stated they were only asking for a limited exemption to protect our most sensitive information. He really tried to assure the public that any loss of transparency would be, minimal.
But when you actually break down the practical effect of this proposed exemption, it was anything but minimal. Let's look at this. If passed, it would put operational and technical files almost completely beyond the reach of FOIA. If an ordinary citizen made a public inquiry, the agency could just reject it outright without even bothering to look for the documents. And most shockingly of all, even illegal activities could be legally covered up and fully immunized from court action. They weren't asking for a small tweak. They wanted to permanently secure the absolute, unquestioned secrecy they used to enjoy.
Part 6. What remains hidden today?
So we've traced a massive paper trail today, from a hushed, hours-long meeting in a Washington Hilton to the secret indexing of tens of thousands of college students, down into the hidden, drug-filled boxes of MKUltra, and finally to the agency's desperate attempt to legally lock the door behind them in 1980. And I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. The documents we explored today, they only exist in the public eye because independent citizens fought tirelessly to pry them loose from an agency that insisted over and over that there was nothing to see. So if operations of this staggering magnitude were buried so deeply back then, and if the agency actively sought legal immunity to re-hide their files, what might be happening behind the scenes today? It's a critical question of modern government transparency that demands our continuous attention. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning and keep learning.